Chicken Thigh Fishing, welcome aboard. If you're interested in installing LED deck lighting on your bass boat, I'm going to show you how. Stick around. Hey folks, Keith here, welcome aboard. Today's video is going to be on the installation of LED deck lighting on a bass boat. Now my particular boat is a 2021 Pro Team 175 TXW from Tracker. Now different boats are going to have different structures and different ways to install things just because of the different layouts of the boat. So I'm going to show you how I did this install on my boat, and it may be similar to your boat, or there may be some differences that make things either more difficult or probably easier for you during the installation. It wasn't an easy installation because I didn't know how to do it, and I learned as I went. I made a few mistakes as I went, and so I'll go over those with you. But I'm going to take you through step by step how I installed my LED lighting on my 2021 Tracker. Now the kit I installed is the Blue Water LED kit, and I got mine from TH Marine. You can get them in different locations. It comes in a bigger box than this. This is a box for a single light strip. It included 11 light strips and 3 submersible lights. I want to say that it included 3 20-inch strips, 4 10-inch strips, 2 12-inch strips, and 2 8-inch strips. So there were 11 light strips in all, plus 3 submersible lights, 1 which I put in my cooler and 2 which I put in my live well. So this is what one of the light strips looks like, and this is a 20-inch one. On the back it has a strong 3M adhesive strip for affixing it to your boat, and of course it comes with wire ends so you can hook them all together. So like I said, in my kit there were 11 of these of various sizes, as well as the submersible lights. I wish I would have done a video during the actual install, but I think I can give you a pretty effective tutorial by going over how I installed my kit. So before I installed them, I laid everything out the way I thought I wanted them on the boat, and then I had to figure out a way to route the wiring in order to make that happen. So I would definitely suggest to you to lay things out and do a dry run as far as where you want your lighting before you start working on the actual install, in case there's something you end up wanting to change later. So I laid mine all out, and I ended up putting 2 strips on either side of my bow deck. I put a 20-inch strip and a 10-inch strip on either side. I took the 2 12-inch strips and I installed those on the rear deck. The 2 8-inch strips I used as accent lighting beneath my seats. Now as you can see, my seats are removed right now because I'm in the process of cleaning my boat and getting it ready for the springtime. There's still snow on the ground and ice on the water here, so it's project time. I installed the third 20-inch strip inside my main storage compartment. And the 2 remaining strips I put in my rod lockers. So I have 4 on the front deck, I have 2 on the rear deck, And then I have one in my main storage compartment, 7, 2 in my rod lockers, 9, and 2, 1 each under the passenger and the driver's seat. And so those were the 11 strips, and that's where I elected to put them. Now, obviously, you can put them anywhere you want. Some people put them in their battery compartment or whatnot. I thought that would be a little bit of a waste because I figured I would rarely actually use that. So anyway, that's what I did with mine. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through step by step on the installation on my particular boat. So as I said, I laid everything out ahead of time, and I had to figure out the pattern that I was going to use in order to wire them, in order to get everything around to my power bank, which of course is underneath the driver's console. Now, some people wire their LED light kits directly to their batteries, as I understand it, but I wanted mine to go to my power bank so I had better control over them. And so after I laid my kit out and decided where I wanted all the lights to go, I figured out what I thought was a good starting point. Now, as I go through this, I'm quite sure that I made some mistakes, and there were probably some things that I could have done much more effectively. So some of you folks with experience with this will probably laugh at some of the choices I made, and that's fine. Again, I'm just a learn-as-you-go guy, and all I know is my lights work, so hey, they work. So in a nutshell, what I decided was I was going to begin with the 2 strips that were going to go under my driver's seat and my passenger seat. So you see one there and one there, and I started with those 2, and then I moved around to the starboard side, the port side, and then I came up the port side and did the front deck lights around the front, and then back down the starboard side, and then I went through the front side of my console to get my power bank. Now you'll notice that I didn't include the compartment lighting in there, and that's because I made them on 2 different circuits. I wanted to have them separate, so I didn't necessarily have to have my compartment lights on when I had the deck lights on. So I wanted them to be on separate circuits. So the first one that I'm going to go over is the deck lighting circuit. So as I said, I began under my seats. The first one I installed was under my driver's seat. Now, right off the rip, I ran into a problem because I knew I wanted them under there because I like having that accent lighting, and it just lights up your deck. And I do a lot of my fishing at night. If you watch my videos, you'll see we're out at night a lot. And so I wanted my boat to be lit up as much as possible when and if I ever needed it to be lit up. So the problem that I ran into was the fact that those strips come with the 3M adhesive strips on the back. Now, those are strong, but I'm certainly not going to use that to attach them to carpet. So clearly, I had to get these lights under my seats in particular attached to carpet. So what I did in order to achieve that was an idea I got from somebody else, actually, and it turned out to be great. What I used were these. What this is it is the tack strip that comes with a threshold that you buy when you are installing a laminate floor and you want to put a threshold from room to room. These strips come with the threshold pieces and they tack into these. And wouldn't you know it, the light strips fit in here absolutely perfectly. It's almost as if these were made for them. So what I did was I went and I got some of this that I had laying around the house from a recent home improvement project I did, and I cut them to length. So here's one cut to length. And then what I did, as you can see, is I painted them with auto enamel spray paint so they would be protected and not stick out like a sore thumb. And, they're black. They also come with holes in them, so that makes it convenient to secure them. So what I did was I cut these to length for the 2 lights under my seat, and I went ahead and I screwed them with self-tapping screws underneath the seats. I drilled a hole big enough for the wires from the light on the wire end of the light strip to go through, and then I secured with 2 or 3 screws. I secured this strip where I wanted it mounted. So then when I had this mounted, all I had to do was fish the wire through the hole that I drilled and then use the 3M adhesive to stick the light strip to this. So this was screwed underneath my seat, and then I put the light strip in this, and it works out fantastic. So if you have a situation where you have to put one of these lights on carpet, this is a good way to go. So there's the one under my driver's seat, and there's the one under the passenger seat. Now again, right off the rip, it was a little tricky because I had to figure out how to wire them under the seats. And you'll see that I have my seats removed now, but I didn't know how to remove them at the time, and I kind of thought that was going to be too much of a task to do. So I actually did this with the seats in, and had I known any better, I would have figured out how to take the seats out like I know now, and I would have done that, and I think it would have been easier. But I'll show you how I did it. I drilled a hole through this panel here, and then I went to fish the wire underneath the seat to come into the middle compartment here. And so I figured I would just go through this side and through this side and wire them together in the middle. Well, that turned out to be easier said than done, because when I went to fish the wires under the seat, something I should have known, underneath the seat is all kinds of flotation foam, and it's thick and it's durable. So what I had to do was I took a rigid fish tape and I poked through that foam until I got to the inside wall on this side of the inside of this compartment. And when I was able to do that, I took a spade bit and I drilled a hole in the side of that wall, and then I was able to fish that wire through. So there's the hole I drilled with the spade bit and where the wire is coming out. Now, again, I'm quite sure there is an easier way to do that or a more efficient way to do that, but that's all I could figure out at the time, and it ended up working for me, so that's how I did it. But that styrofoam or that foam, that flotation foam that's packed in underneath the seat pedestal there was tough to get through. I imagine it would be significantly easier if you removed all the various panels of the boat. But I just didn't want to get into that at the time, and when I tried going through the foam, it ended up working, so I went with that. So now I had the one mounted under the driver's seat and the one mounted under the passenger seat, and I had both sets of wires from those lights coming into this compartment. Now when you connect these lights to one another, obviously you have to use a piece of connecting wire to go from light to light. So for the connections, I used waterproof heat shrink butt connectors, and after I connected those, I wrapped them in electrical tape for further protection. So underneath in this middle compartment here, I had the wires from one light, the wires from the other light, and then the connecting wires to go to the next light. So then what I did was drilled a hole here, and that is right under the corner of the seat, and it's completely not visible because the seat actually comes here like this, and so this is not visible. So that was the easiest way for me to go. I thought I just drilled a hole in an inconspicuous place, and so then I was able to take the wire connections from underneath here and put them up through here. So this is the connecting wire that is coming off the connection from those two lights. So I took the wire, and I initially had this wire just running across here underneath the seat in a fashion where you couldn't see it anyway, so it didn't bother me. But I actually changed it since I learned how to take the seats out, and I ran it in this direction, and then I went underneath the carpet here all the way to the edge over here, and I was able to simply stick it through this void here. So now I'm going to go up this void and over here to my first deck light. Now again, it is carpeted, and so I didn't have enough room on this lip to adhere it here. So again, I used one of those tack strips for a laminate flooring threshold, and I did the same thing that I did underneath the driver's seat and the passenger seat, and again, that worked well. So what I did was I removed this panel here, and this panel is secured by 3 screws along the end of it. And just a note, those screws are really hard to find when they've never been removed before, because they are buried in the carpet. So once you have the screws removed, this panel is easy to remove, and so the installation is quite easy, as you can see here. Underneath this panel, this is used for wire routing for the boat anyway. So you can see here where I drilled the hole for the light strip, and these are the wires from the light strip coming out. And I went ahead here, and here's an example of the connection I made. And so I have the wire coming from the 2 lights under the seats, which is this gray wire, because the connecting wires have a sheath over them, and that's the sheath. And inside is the red and the black wires. So here's my connecting wire. Here is my wire from the light that's on this panel. And then here is my connecting wire that's going to take it around the boat. And in the back you have another panel that is easily removable. It has 2 screws in the flange there, and I've already removed those. And you can see where my connecting wire goes behind here, and it's running along here. So I ran the wire across the transom here. Now I figure there's probably a much better way to get from point A to point B crossing the transom, but I couldn't figure one out, and so I just went with that. And so now my connecting wire comes across the transom and then behind this panel, which again is secured by screws and easily removable. So my connecting wire is running over here to the port side of the boat, where I could install the port side back deck light. And this one here isn't carpeted, and so I was able to stick it right to the gunnel here, so I didn't have to use one of those tack strips to put it on carpet. And so I just used the adhesive strip that comes with it and put it right in there. Now here's an interesting part about the tracker boats. Tracker boats come with what they call the VersaTrack rail system, and that is this groove that you see here. Now I don't use my VersaTrack system. I understand that's for things like outriggers or different things like that, but anyway, I never used it, so I figured, well, why not use it for the wiring? So all the way around my boat, I used that VersaTrack groove in here to run the wiring. The only problem was then you could see the wiring, and so you had red and white or gray wiring going through there, and I didn't like the look of that. Well, it turns out after I installed it, I figured out a way to make it look better, and a 3/8 rope fits perfectly in there on top of the wires. So you'll see here where I have the rope in there over the wiring, so you can't see the wiring at all. And so I bought a length of 3/8 black rope and ran it all the way around the VersaTrack, and it looks terrific. You don't even notice it. It blends in. It looks like it was supposed to be that way. You can see here how I have that dock line tucked into the groove that the wires are in, and it conceals the wires, and it's very inconspicuous. And like I said, it almost looks like it's supposed to be that way, and I kind of like the way it looks. Now, one thing I learned regarding these connections during my installation, where I made a mistake and I had to change it, was in using that VersaTrack groove on the gunnels of my boat to put the wiring in. I initially wired one light to the other directly like this. What that ended up creating, of course I had two butt connectors, one connecting the positive wires and one connecting the negative wires. I had the wires from one light connected to the wires from another light, and then the connecting wire going, and then I wrapped it in electrical tape, and so it was doubled up and it was pretty fat. and that fit inside the groove of the Versatrack, but I was unable to effectively put that dock line over it to conceal it because it took up too much room. It was a fat connection, especially with the tape over the butt connectors. And so my dock line that I was using to conceal the wires in that Versatrack groove came, and then it went way out around them. So what I did to remedy that was, when I made my connections, I staggered them. I made one side, either the negative or the positive, longer, and that way when I made my connections, I was able to stagger the locations of the butt connectors, and then so they were in a single line rather than doubled up. And then when I did that, there was still room enough to put that dock line in to conceal the wires. And concealing the wires was important to me. Again, you may be somebody that doesn't bother you seeing the wires there, but I just like the clean finished look of not seeing wires, and so I went with that. So anyway, I recommend, if you're going to do it on this boat that has a Versatrack system, cut one of the wires back, either positive or negative, and then stagger where those butt connectors are so they will fit nicely into that Versatrack groove, and then you can put a dock line or whatever else you want to put in there to conceal those wires. And so now when it came to putting the strip lights on the gunnels, I wanted to make sure I was super careful when drilling a hole here. Now, you don't necessarily have to drill a hole. You can take the wire and just come right up here and go into the Versatrack groove and then run the wires along there. But I just thought that would be ugly with wires coming up here. So what I did was, on each of these lights, the wire is right behind here, and so I drilled a hole through the lip of this Versatrack groove. So what I did was, as you see, the wire comes out the end here. I cut back this little flange here of this black rubber on the end of it, and I peeled that back. I carefully cut that so I didn't cut the wires, and I peeled that back, and then what I was able to do was have the wire coming straight back. And so the wire, instead of coming out the end like that, I turned it to a right angle. But you want to be super careful when you do that. You know, I mean, anytime you're drilling a hole in a boat, you want to be careful. So you don't necessarily have to do what I did in order to mount these there. You can just simply have the wire coming out the end here and then going in, but I just didn't want that visible. I'm kind of crazy about that kind of stuff. If you're somebody that having a little section of wire being visible doesn't bother, then I would highly recommend not drilling holes in your boat. But I know it would have aggravated me to no end to have a piece of wire coming out of the end of every strip light that I could see. So now we've gone from underneath the passenger seat to underneath the driver's seat to this back deck on the starboard side, across the transom, and to the back deck on the port side. So now I ran the connecting wire all the way up to the front deck on the port side, and so that was a straight and easy connection to make. So I connected to the large strip light, and then I connected to the smaller strip light on the port side, and then I had to go around the front. And so this panel, just like the others in the back, comes out. This has more screws. This has like 8 or 10 screws in it. There are screws along the top, and there are screws along the bottom, and they're difficult to find, like I said, because they are buried in that carpet. But when you find them, this pops out. So with that panel out, I was able to, of course, just run the connecting wire across the front of the boat and to the starboard side. So then I ran to the front light on the starboard side, and then I ran to the back light on the starboard side. And so that brought me all the way over to the corner there by my console, and I was able to simply run it through here and get it down through this void in order to come out underneath and connect to my power bank. So now I had the deck lights installed, and I wanted to figure out how exactly I wanted to control those. And now I didn't want them to be simply on or off, because when they're on, they're super, super bright. You can't really fish with them on full blast because the light is so strong that you can't see past the light. I rarely use them for actual fishing anyway. I use them to light up my boat for any reason that I need my boat lit up. But anyway, I didn't want them to have just an on-off position, so when I ordered the kit, I also ordered the dimmer switch. And you'll see that I installed that right there on my control panel. So I took the connecting wire from the last light, I connected that with the dimmer switch, and then I ran that to the power bank, and so now I am able to control my lights on or off, and I can dim them all the way down or crank them all the way up for whatever the situation is. So a couple things about installing that dimmer switch. Obviously you have to remove this panel in order to do that. And so I recommend, this is just plastic, so I recommend not using a drill and doing that by hand. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's a screw down here, 5, and this panel comes out. But of course it's connected to all these switches. Now again, this was not here, so I had to drill a hole through this panel to accommodate that. I was worried about shattering that panel because it's plastic, so when I drilled the hole to put the stem of the dimmer switch through, I started off with as small a drill bit as I could, and then I just went bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger till I got to the size of the hole that I needed to accommodate the stem on the dimmer switch. And so I put the stem through and then was able to put the knob on. But I didn't want to go through with the full size of it because I was really worried about shattering that plastic and then having to order a new panel. So anyway, that's what I did. Also, you'll see from this photograph of what the dimmer switch looks like, it's got that big unit on the back of it. And when I decided on a location for the dimmer switch, obviously I decided that I was going to put it here because that's where I thought it fit nicely and it didn't get in the way of anything else. But what I didn't take into consideration was that big honking section in the back, and I didn't make sure there was clearance behind the panel, and there wasn't, because the lip of the molding of the driver's console itself extends out to here behind this panel, and so that big box section on that dimmer switch didn't fit, so I wasn't able to put it in. So what I did was I took a saw and I was able to cut a little, like a half moon section out so that fit in, and so I didn't take that into consideration. I was only looking for the best spot on the front without thinking of what was behind it, and I didn't want to drill another hole, so I cut that lip, which is behind the panel, and you'll never see it anyway. So now I had my deck lights and the dimmer switch installed. So now I had to install the compartment lighting strips. So on the compartment lights, I began with one of the submersible lights that I put in my cooler. And so you can see the light right there. I drilled a hole for the wire of the light to go behind here in this compartment underneath here. I ran the wires through, and then the light comes with the adhesive, and so I adhered the light itself to the wall of the cooler, and then I took the hole there and I sealed that with marine sealant. And now I could have done a prettier job of this, but you can see where the wire comes out. This is the wire from the cooler light, and it goes up here and connects with the wire from the strip that I mounted in my rod locker. Now again, inside the rod locker there's carpeting, so again I use those tack strips in order to mount those strips in there. So on this end I drilled a hole to put the wire through. You can see where the wire comes through there from that light, comes over here, and I connected it to the wire from the submersible light in the cooler, and then I have the connecting wire coming out to go to the next light, which is this large strip here, which I use for my main storage compartment. Now coming around here, again, I have a rod locker strip inside this rod locker. So it's coming out the hole there. I drilled a hole for the wire to come out from the rod locker strip, connected it here to this light, and then I have the connecting wire going down here, and I ran out of length of wire, so I did another connection here with another connecting wire, and you can see that void I was able to go through in the corner there. So now we're in the other rod locker, and you can see where the wire comes through the void, and I went ahead and removed this rod rack here, and that's with a screw right there, and you just pull that out, and you can see where I used wire harnesses to secure that to the back wall of the rod locker. And you can see right there where I went through the back wall of the rod locker in order to get underneath the console and connect with the power bank. Now the other wire you see there, I'll explain in a minute. Now again, there was probably a better way, a more efficient way, or a prettier way I could have done that, but I'm not an expert at this, and so that's what I came up with. So now I have the submersible in my cooler, the light strip in the rod locker, the light strip in the main storage compartment, the other rod locker light strip, and then I have the wiring going underneath to the power bank underneath the console. But I still wanted to use the two remaining submersible lights to use in my live well. So in order to put those two submersible lights in my live well, I drilled two inconspicuous holes. I drilled one right here, and I drilled one right here. And so I was able to mount the two submersible lights for the live well. I put the wire through the hole and then used the adhesive to mount them, and then I used marine sealant to seal the holes. I have the wire coming out from this light, and I have the wire coming out from this light, and they're underneath this carpet lip here, running along with that other one into this void. Then I was able to fish it through, and the easiest thing I came up with was coming through this void in the corner here and then drilling another hole through the back wall of the rod locker to get underneath to the power bank. So the first one was for the other compartments, and that wire you see on the left there, the gray one, is coming from the live well. So for the deck lights, what I have is them going all the way around the boat, as you saw, and then underneath the driver's console, and then joined with the wiring from the dimmer switch. And so the wires that I have coming underneath there, I connected to wires that I put on the dimmer switch, and then a connecting wire going off those to the power bank, where I connected positive and negative there. And then for the separate circuit of the compartment lights, I put those the same way. I connect those to the wiring of the accessory switch, and then a connecting wire going down to the power bank and connecting those positive and negative. And I put an inline 3-amp fuse on each one of those circuits. My compartment lights are connected to the accessory switch. So if I want to turn on my compartment lights, I simply flip the switch, and you can see that my lights come on. And then I can turn those off. And when I turn that dimmer switch, the deck lights come on. So I can have them either both on at the same time or only one on, one or the other. So that worked out rather nicely. It's hard to get a gauge on what these lights look like in the daylight. So this is what they look like at night. and they can also be dimmed down. And here's what the compartment lights look like. The cooler, main storage area, rod lockers, and a live well. And so these lights are terrific, and I love them, especially having them on the dimmer switch. I use them all the time. Like I said, I don't use them for fishing because they're actually way too bright for fishing. But anytime you need to light up your deck, if you're fixing something, if you're tending to some tackle, or just doing anything at night, or you want to see better at night for whatever reason, these lights light up your deck more than sufficiently. So it's a great addition to your boat. It does take some time on the install, and if you're like me and you are a learn as you go guy, you're gonna make mistakes like I did along the way, and then, you know, try to fix them. And like I said several times, I am quite sure that at different points in this installation, I could have done things in a more efficient or more appropriate or better way, but you don't know what you don't know. So I did what worked, and they work great, and I love them. So hey, if you're thinking about putting LED deck lighting or compartment lighting on your boat, especially if it's on a tracker and you have this same boat, I hope this video was a help to you. Hey, we'll see you next time. As always, thanks for being a part of Chicken Thigh Fishing. We appreciate you very much. Stay fishing, my friends.